Hi, welcome to this podcast where I attempt to review two films by the acclaimed Russian director Andrei Tarkovsky. Tarkovsky only directed and released 7 feature films between 1962 and 1986 due to his untimely death from terminal cancer. And it's important to note that all these films are actually considered masterpieces within themselves. But two of my personal favourite films by the director are Stalker and The Mirror, which is why this podcast will attempt to review those two films. So without further ado, thanks very much for listening, and I hope you enjoy. In Tarkovsky's published diaries, it's clear that the 1970s were a particularly harrowing decade for him. His autobiographical movie, The Mirror, was not permitted to be screened outside of the Soviet Union, and other projects he had had in mind, such as a film adaptation of Dostoevsky's The Idiot, were more than frowned upon by these who made the Soviet film policy. The filmmaker even pondered retiring from cinema and focusing solely on theatre work, but ultimately those years of agony and uncertainty eventually gave rise to the last film Tarkovsky would make in the Soviet Union. Stalker is an adaptation of a novel called Roadside Picnic by the Strugatsky brothers. Tarkovsky read the book soon after it came out in the literary magazine Rover in 1972. The screenplay that was written by the very authors of the book, in collaboration with Tarkovsky, is held in the greatest of esteems today, and Andrei Tarkovsky's reputation far surpassed even what his closest collaborators probably dared to imagine back then, with his poetic style of filmmaking, captivating long takes, heavy reliance on the power of images and the visual and frequent exploration of metaphysical and spiritual subjects. Traditionally understood as an allegory about faith, Stalker is not only a cinematic representation of failure of the promised Soviet future, but also a still pertinent guide to our present moment. In a post-apocalyptic world devoid of faith and purpose lies an uninhabited and seemingly supernatural body of heavily guarded land, simply known as the Zone, in which the normal laws of physics do not apply, and the remnants of seemingly extraterrestrial activity lie undisturbed amongst its ruins. Within the Zone, there is said to be a room that grants anyone willing to enter their deepest desires. As an illegal guide who has devoted his life to taking people within the depths of the Zone to experience the room, Stalker agrees to escort a writer and scientist beyond the limits of their dystopian city so that one can rid himself of the crippling writer's block he carries, and the other to obtain a revolutionary scientific breakthrough in the hopes of receiving a Nobel Prize he has so longingly desired. As the three characters cautiously meander their way through the treacherous plateaus of the Zone, the Stalker tells his clients they must do exactly as he says to survive the dangers which lie ahead, and explains that the Zone must be respected, and that the straightest path is not always the safest. The Stalker tests for various traps the Zone seemingly leaves for people by throwing metal nuts tied to strips of cloth ahead of them, and as he does so, speaks of a previous Stalker named Porcupine, who led his brother to his death in the Zone, visited the room, came into possession of a large sum of money, and shortly afterwards committed suicide after the room granted his deepest desire. And what follows is an intensely psychological and philosophical, existential journey that poetically examines the nature of faith and finding purpose in a world devoid of meaning. Stalker is far more than a cinematic experience, but more akin to a religious one, where every sound and visual falls together to create an expression or something other and outside of the realm of reality. The film's soundscape is of immense importance in creating this sense of duality, where a nuanced merging of sound and music guides the viewer to confront the inner depths of the film's real subjects, which relates to desire and of free will. What you're listening to now is Stalker's aptly named main theme, Meditation, which was composed and produced by Tarkovsky's sound designer and composer Edward Artemyev. As the song plays during the opening scene, the music's drone-like qualities guide us into the meditative state through what Tarkovsky deemed prayer-like and contemplative melodies. And as the film progresses, we begin to see a visual cinematic style that complements these prayer-like tones. Tarkovsky was notorious for using long, contemplative shots of nature, entrancing the viewer with their incredible atmosphere and poetic undertones, and Stalker is without a doubt the best example of how this can be achieved visually. The cinematography is initially engulfed by a filter of sepia at the beginning of the film, used to indicate the city's lifeless atmosphere, but suddenly shifts into an explosion of colour as the three main characters enter the Zone, that is said to conjure a heavenly presence. The three main characters are played by three fairly unconventional Russian actors at the time, with Alexander Kadanovsky as Stalker giving an exceptionally realistic portrayal as someone who must come to terms with and accept that faith is becoming more irrelevant day by day. Kadanovsky powerfully captured a character who was heavily bound to the world through his faith, and his desperate, intense tones show why Tarkovsky chose him to play the role of Stalker. Part 2, The Mirror, by Andrei Tarkovsky. The Mirror is more than a narrative explanation of semi-autobiographical material. It's an attempt to recreate the experience of memory. In order to do this, Tarkovsky eschews typical linear structure for an editing style that uses sense experiences, emotion, and poetry to link its scenes and thoughts. Despite the fact that this makes it difficult at times to tell when certain things are happening, it also creates a sort of haze that we end up watching the film through. This haze is not visual but mental. In some ways it's even hard to remember the film and its individual scenes and characters, since they flow in and out of the film so effortlessly, and continue to do so once the credits have rolled. It's this quality, however, that gives this film its status amongst the greatest cinematic accomplishments in history. Tarkovsky sets out not to make a great movie, but to create an experience unlike anything anyone has ever made before. He wants to recreate what you might find if you could crack open the head of a man and read his memories. People may debate how well he succeeds, but the fact that he attempts such a thing and has created such a moving piece of art solidifies him as one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. The mystery of why we remember or latch on to certain memories and not others, or how we can misunderstand something for years, or how a thing can mean one thing in our childhood and another in our adulthood, are all themes of this film that emerge as the camera lingers in a decidedly Tarkovskian manner. It isn't through the discussion, however, of these concepts that the film explores these ideas. Rather, it is we, the audience, that explores those ideas through the film. As an actor with the task of simultaneously playing Tarkovsky's mother and wife through a non-linear fashion, the performance Margarita Terrakova gives is stunning, and her talent of portraying two incredibly diverse characters is shown through her ability to capture different emotions so realistically.